the presidential election would be held today between Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, it would be a super close one. And that's according to a new poll done by the New York Times and Siena College. In fact, take a look at this graphic that shows you, again, if the election were to be held today, Biden and Trump would tie at 43%. Only 14% of respondents in this poll do not know who they would vote for or don't like either candidate. So let's get into the details here, because as the Times puts it perfectly, it might have been reasonable to think that President Biden would have a clear advantage in a rematch against Donald Trump. Yet, despite the Stop the Steal movement, the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and the numerous investigations facing Trump, Biden and Trump are still tied. Look, I think that two things can be true. This does not speak well of people who just decide to downplay some of the behavior that Trump is engaged in, some of the potential criminality he engaged in. But more importantly, and I want to emphasize this more than anything, this does not speak well of President Joe Biden. The fact that he's in a dead heat with someone who is now indicted in 3 separate criminal cases is very, very bad news for Biden. It speaks to his lack of leadership and his inability to connect with voters, his inability to inspire them and encourage them to want to support him. And there are more damning details here, because if you think the 14% that remains in this poll, the undecideds, are winnable by Biden, you might be wrong. As the Times also reports, our Times Siena polls last fall, which were notably accurate, also showed a very close race in a possible presidential rematch, including a 1-point lead for Trump among registered voters in our final October survey. And just 41% of registered voters say they have a favorable view of Donald Trump, while a majority believe he committed serious federal crimes and say his conduct after the last election went so far that it threatened American democracy. So 41% of registered voters believe that. And according to this poll, Biden and Trump still tied. Still tied. In fact, Biden is doing worse today compared to the previous poll that the New York Times did last fall. Biden shows little strength of his own. His favorability rating is only 2 points higher than Trump's. And despite an improving economy, his approval rating is only 39%, a mere 2 points higher than it was in our poll in October before the midterm election. And look, to make matters worse for Biden or Trump, depending on who you prefer, let's get to that remaining 14%, because I think that's the important part. These are the individuals who end up deciding elections. Things have become so polarized, so partisan, that the undecideds, they're the kingmakers. So who are they likely to go for? The 14% of voters who didn't back Biden or Trump consisted mostly of people who volunteered, even though it wasn't provided as an option in the poll, that they would vote for someone else or simply wouldn't vote if those were the candidates. Not good news. So just imagine the scenario where Donald Trump ends up winning the Republican primaries, and he's up against Joe Biden, an incredibly unpopular president, and it's super close. Let's say Biden is able to eke out a win, eke out a tiny, tiny win. You think Trump isn't gonna contest that? I mean, we're gonna have an endless cycle of election denialism, just complete chaos, probably worse than what we experienced on January 6th. Now, I'm just predicting this. I don't know if it's actually gonna play out that way. But there's also a scenario in which Trump wins again. I mean, I can't say re-election, he didn't win in 2020, but you get what I'm saying. There's that scenario as well. I think that Biden is really playing with fire, and what really concerns me is that the Democratic Party has not learned any lessons from what happened in 2016. The Biden camp is super excited about running against Trump because they've beat him before. Why not beat him again? But things are a little different this time around. The stink of Trump's coronavirus handling has kind of faded. And the leadership that we've seen from Biden is really fresh in our memories. So what is likely to happen among independent voters? Are they going to side with Trump or Biden? And more importantly, will these indictments and will criminal prosecution play any role in swaying them toward the Democratic candidate? I don't know. But my point here is that this news, these polls, do not speak highly of Biden's leadership. And it's super frustrating to hear members of the Democratic Party gaslight us over and over again about what an effective president he's been. Please stop insulting our intelligence. We live in reality. We can see what's happening here.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.